Well, what's happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Crossed Up. Anthony Sanfilippo's here. I'm Bob Wankel, and it's been a little bit here, Anthony,
Been a
but
minute.
we're back. You know, a couple people reaching out on X. I've made the transition to X. I'm not
Yeah.
going to call it Twitter anymore. I'm going to just accept it. But people are like, "What's up? You know, you guys doing this?" And we are sort of. So before we get into the Phillies, which is obviously what we're going to spend the majority of time talking about. We do have some housekeeping stuff here off the top. It's going to be a little bit of a different look for you and I this year. So why don't you go ahead and tell everybody what's going on here?
So I mean, let's if in the interest of complete transparency, Bob, you and I no longer work for the same company, and
Yes.
so it's kind of difficult for both of us to work on a podcast that is affiliated with one company when both of us don't work at the same place.
Yes.
So we've discussed this, we've talked about this at length, and for a while now, I've been trying to figure out the best way to move forward to keep the show going because we like doing the show and we want to continue to do it, and we are gonna be able to do it, but we have to leave this platform. Um, uh, and when we say leave this platform, it's no longer going to be called Crossed Up. It's no longer going to be done through Crossing Broad's feed. We are going to be starting a brand new feed and a brand new show. It's going to be the same thing. It's going to be you and me, doing the same stuff we've done all along for Philly season. But it's going to be we're actually going to go on Russ's platform on Joy Media, and we came up with a new name for the show, and it's going to be called Fightin' Words, PH Fightin' Words, and that will be the plan is as of now still do a couple more of these here on Crossstop, maybe 2 or 3, and then once everything is ready to go over at Joy Media, we'll leave you guys with the message that says, hey, check out the new show over at Joy Media, and then you'll have to go over there. But one thing that we're going to try and do over there, Bob, is do some live streams as opposed to just recording it and popping it into a podcast feed. So we'll be on YouTube as well, and so we'll get that started over there as well. So that's kind of what the plan is here and how it's going to go forward. But since it's taken a little bit longer than we initially thought it would. We'll give you a couple more episodes, depending on a couple of things on the back end. But the goal is I will be down in spring training by March 12th, that the new show will be launched by then while I'm down in spring training. So a few more crossed ups, and then we'll make sure that everybody has the new site and everything. We'll put it up here for everyone to talk about, or everybody to listen to and be able to get over there and listen to us.
Yeah, look, I mean, we've been doing this since what, 2018? Gabe's
Yeah.
first year, was that?
Gabe's first year, yes.
So, I mean, it's been a long time. I mean, it feels quick in some ways, but it really hasn't been in a lot of others. And it was important to me that we were still able to, even after you left Crossing Broad, be able to do the show together. And I'm happy that we're moving forward. And look, some people are like, well, do you still work for? What about Bob? Is he still part of Crossing Broad? I'm like, I am. I work for the company that owns Crossing Broad, but CB has gone through 2 separate sales since since Kyle Scott way back in the day owned it. And quite honestly, we don't own Crossed Up. We don't own the show, and now we do. And it'll be an opportunity for us to dig into this a little bit more and probably be even a little bit more committed to it than we previously were, because Anthony and I will actually be, the owners of it. Whereas before it was not technically our property, which is why, we're going to, be on a different platform, be on a different feed, try some different things moving forward. But, it's kind of like 2.0 version of the show, but the show is going to be exactly the same at its core, and we're happy to do it. So moving on past that, look, it's kind of interesting talking on February 24th about the early impressions of where everybody's at psychologically with the Phillies. And we've had the benefit now of some of the Eagles hangover transitioning into, so, hey, they're playing baseball down in Clearwater. How do we feel about this? And where things left off last season was not feeling very good about it at all. It was a team that did not play consistently well the second half of the season. It's a team that had a lot of obvious flaws. Those obvious flaws were exposed in a terribly frustrating series against the New York Mets and a premature playoff exit. And I think it left a bitter taste in a lot of people's mouths. And you fast forward now to February and turning the page, And it feels like a lot of people have not turned the page, that a lot of people are still pretty upset about where things are directionally headed with the Phillies in a way. I don't know that it was a bad offseason, but it certainly was not an exciting one. This team will look largely the same. I want to talk about that. And I guess, there seems to be this overall sense that show me, that we've entered into Sixers territory, right? It's something I've heard a lot of people say. I'm not surprised to hear both fans and people on the radio saying this, but is that really where this fan base is going to spend its summer? Is that really what we're doing here?
It's a shame because it shouldn't be there. Because the reality is still, even with the team being mostly the same, that the Phillies are one of, I don't know, 6 or 7 teams that you look at in baseball and say, yeah, they have a shot to win the World Series.
Right.
Now, that's no longer good enough, I guess, in this
Do you think it's the looming ghost of the Dodgers, though, a team that wins it all and then goes out and now just spends and spends and spends? Is it that? Is it a fatigue of this cast of characters? Like, well, it's another season of Aaron Nola's ups and downs. Oh, it's Castellanos going the month of June hitting 140 with 39 strikeouts. Like, is it the overall picture? Because they have the 4th best odds to win the World Series going into this, and they might have the best starting rotation in baseball, but is it the Dodgers? Is it fatigue? Like, what is it that we got?
It's probably a little bit of everything, right? The Dodgers thing bothers me, though, Bob, because, the Dodgers finally were able to, get over the hump and win a full season of baseball championship first time since 1988. And they've been spending, out their wazoo for decades, right? I mean, really, they've been one of the top teams salary-wise in Major League Baseball for a long, long time. And it was the first time in a while that a team with the top payroll won a championship in baseball. So, that's why it bothers me. It's because it doesn't happen all the time. In fact, last year was the outlier that it did happen. Now, that being said, the teams that do spend the most money are always seem to be in the playoffs. And that's because they have A, the best players, and B, a little bit more depth because they're spending more money than other teams. So it's good to be one of those teams, and the Phillies are one of those teams. But at the same time, I do think that we get into a mode where 2022 was fun and exciting and everybody loved it, right? Because it was an unexpected ride to the World Series. The disappointment of losing to Arizona. If that was if that was the Braves, if that was the Dodgers, if that was, even the Padres, I know they weren't in the playoffs that year, but if it was a team that had been there and was good and you expected to be a good team and the Phillies lose those 2 games at home, you're disappointed about it, but you probably don't look at it as a choke, right? Yeah. The fact that it happened to the Arizona Diamondbacks bothered this city. And then you go out and get beat in the first round by the Mets, your arch rival last year, and I think that expedites the show me, I'll wait till October and you prove it to me kind of mentality that the city has right now.
Yeah, and I don't know that it's fair and it's not, because there's part of me that feels that a little bit with these guys. It's like, what can they do over the next 7 months that's really going to get you excited, where you're going to be all in and believe? And there's probably answers to that question, right? I don't mean that in a rhetorical sense. And I think we have to kind of think about what those answers are. But when you blow it the way that you did against Arizona 2 years ago, and you lose the way that you did in a really predictable way, in a lot of ways. I was there. Remember, I did the podcast with your son, and I was like, I don't want to play the Mets. I think the Mets are going to beat them. And then by the time the series rolled around, I sort of talked myself into the better team prevailing. But the writing was sort of on the wall. And even though you looked at them on paper and understood that they were a superior team and maybe still the best team in the National League going into the postseason, if they could just figure a couple things out, you sort of just felt it coming if you were being honest with yourself. And I think you're right. The way that it played out in 23 and in last year, it leads you to this spot now where I don't think it's about the Dodgers and the crazy payroll, because to be fair, the Phillies spend. They have the third highest payroll commitment in 2025 coming into this season. Like they're in. It's not like the ownership's cheaping out here. They didn't drop the hammer this offseason. They didn't make a big splash. I don't know that that's something that you can fully criticize them for. I sort of like that they're leaving themselves a little bit of flexibility here to kind of bridge the gap into the next wave of talent. So I don't even kill them for that, really. But I do think that it's more rooted in this group of players all together again with no real significant tweak to it that makes you sort of feel like I sort of have seen this show before, even if this group as constructed is good enough to win a World Series, which I think it might be. It's just like, damn, like, can we introduce like a new character or two to this mix that's not Jordan Romano or, Max Kepler, like somebody that really changes the dynamic a little bit?
Yeah, and Bob, my biggest complaint of the offseason was that they didn't do a good enough job addressing their biggest need. Like, I actually like a few of the moves that they made in the offseason. I like Romano. I think that's a good risk to take. I like the trade for Jesus Luzardo. It wasn't necessarily a major need, but it was a need. It was a need because you saw what it was like. We talked about it. How many times did we talk about the number 5 starter in the second half of last year, right? I mean, so it was a need. It wasn't the biggest need, but it was a need. And I kind of liked the subtle Joe Ross signing because I think he plays that. He could be the 6th starter if you need
swing,
it. But
yeah, you theoretically by June, July-ish, I believe was what Dave Dombrowski said, where you see Andrew Painter.
For Painter. Yeah.
You could have 7 guys here where you need that depth, and we saw that you needed that depth. One of the things that we talked so much about last year is how bad the Phillies were after June 1, right? Mm-hmm. The whole year was April and May, and then they sputtered late. But what I would go back and say is this. From June 1st on, Taijuan Walker made 13 starts for them. They were 2-11 when he started games. So they were still, even though they were still pretty uninspiring from June forward, they were still 53-38 in games not started by Taijuan Walker after June 1st last year.
Yeah.
So, I think that we might actually be underappreciating the Luzardo move because I think there's a world where he could be your 3rd best starter this year if he stays healthy, which I know is a big if. But he has the stuff that I think when it's all said and done, that if he makes his consistent starts and pitches to his capability, and I think that he takes a step forward. I trust the pitching coach. I think with the way that Eagles fans look at Vic Fangio getting the best out of that group of players, I think Caleb Cotham gets the best out of his guys. I think there's a world where this guy really impresses us and makes them deep as hell in that rotation.
And I agree with you completely. And I think that the pitching is strong this year. My biggest concern was I didn't like the Kepler signing. I didn't like it for
You're still left.
For a number of reasons. I didn't like it. That's the biggest one. Is that it's another left-handed bat who can't hit righties or who can't hit lefties, and you basically have a situation where you're crossing your fingers and hope either him or Marsh figures it out against lefties. Yeah. Otherwise, you have to figure out a way to do 2 platoons in the outfield, and you don't have the depth there to fill that need. So I wouldn't be surprised, Bob, if the Phillies are on the prowl for a depth outfield.
Feels a little incomplete right now. It does feel a little incomplete. And you don't want to feel incomplete when you're talking about Bryce Harper here again. Everyone's at the, Schwarber in the last year of his deal. Like this group, this core is running out of time. Like you don't want to have question marks. You don't want to feel like you have to jam puzzle pieces together to make it work. And I understand that frustration. I understand that that's part of it. I actually want to give you a different spin to this. And it sort of ties into what I've led with here, which is like this overall fatigue with this current group of players. And I think it's started early in a way, right from the start of spring training. Like Nick Castellanos, we've talked about this guy so much on this show and how he's a thinker and he's just a different kind of cat. And when you get to kind of know him and talk to him, you sort of appreciate what he is. He's not perfect. Like, we get all that. The comments, though, right from Jump Street this year about, well, if we lose, you guys and media will, get to say that you're right. And if we win, it'll be a happy little surprise. Like, nobody thinks like that, Nick. Like, nobody thinks like that. Now, I don't know if you're trying to take the pressure off yourself, take the pressure off the clubhouse because you guys felt that pressure last year and it ultimately was part of your undoing. I don't know what it is, man. But, like, that's not rooted in reality. And when you have a fan base that I think looks at a group of players and says, you've underachieved, you let massive opportunities to win a championship get away from you, and now you come in and, like, these are the first comments that we're going to be sold on. I'm not saying the clubhouse feels like that. I'm not saying Bryce Harper feels like that. I don't even think Nick Castellanos might feel like that. But it's just like, Jesus Christ. Like, this is what we're leading with? Like, nobody believes in us. It'll be nice if we win because the pressure's off. Pressure's not off, buddy. Like, I hope you know that. The pressure's absolutely not off.
Yeah. The one thing I wonder if he would, and I don't know the answer to this because I haven't been down there yet, so I haven't had a chance to talk to him this spring. Hopefully I'll get a better answer in a couple weeks. But I wonder if he was a little bit, he didn't get his point across the right way. And it came out the way it came out. Sure. And I wonder if he's thinking of it this way, Bob. There's been a lot of talk about a lot of other teams in baseball this offseason. And the Phillies, nobody's talked about them. And it's almost as if not talking about the Phillies, and you've been used to hearing people talk about them for the better part of 3 seasons, that makes it seem like that nobody believes in them anymore. Yeah. And so maybe that's kind of the message he's trying to say. I don't know if he is or not.
Look, it's entirely possible. It's entirely possible, but it's just one of those things that, like, hey, the Phils are starting up. Let's hear from Nick Castellanos.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great. And then, Trey Turner talks, and he's aware that people were upset that he said he didn't go back and look at his at-bats down the stretch. I don't really care if he looked at him or not. I don't know how you feel about that, but to me, he sounded like a guy that knew he wasn't good enough at the end of last year. The fact of the matter is, whether or not he's accountable and whether or not he realizes that he wasn't good enough, I don't think is really the issue. The issue was that he wasn't good enough. And now you're in year 3 of this deal that just feels like will go on forever. And you got a guy that's playing shortstop that you don't trust defensively on a consistent basis, who's been so incredibly hot and cold that feels a little bit taxing and exhausting. And Castellanos is playing in right, and his inconsistencies and at the plate, when I say in right, I just mean him being the right fielder, not his defense. He's been fine out there. But just the ups and downs of him at the plate, Real Muto sort of feeling like he's in decline. Boom, a guy that you might hit third this year with this retooled lineup who was so far gone in that Mets series that you benched him. Max Kepler, who's left-handed, and doesn't really fit the need of what they had out there. And Johan Rojas, we're doing this again where he might get consistent at bats and you're banking on Brandon Marsh, who everyone loves, to hit left-handed pitching. And it's not a super easy, and they'll get going if they win 10 of their first 15 games and they're pitching and Harper's hitting home runs and they're doing their thing. We'll be all right back in. I believe that. And that's ultimately where I'm going with this in a very long-winded way. I think if they start playing good ball, it'll be fine. But right now, I understand. If you're listening to this, you're excited for the Phillies because you're a huge Phillies fan listening to a podcast in the beginning or end of February, about 2 guys talking about the Phillies. So I'm not here to rain on your parade. What I'm saying, though, is I do understand if there's a little bit of we'll see. We'll see, I guess. I think that's fair.
Yeah, Turner is an interesting guy to me because we've been through everything with him, right? And I kind of feel like last season, if he didn't get hurt, it could have been a different story with him. I think that he was very tentative when he came back, not necessarily at the plate, although he did have some slumps he was chasing a lot of pitches out of the zone. Nobody was throwing him fastballs anymore. And he didn't really adjust to that very well. But I have a feeling that there was a loss of confidence in some things, and I don't think it was in his ability, but I think it was in his physical being. And because of that, he wasn't running, taking those extra bases. He wasn't doing the things that you need him to do, and so everything then became every mistake he made, which there were a ton in the field, became paramount,
Yeah.
and it became spotlighted. And so, like, I think that, when you look at his final numbers, they're not bad.
Yeah, he had an
Like,
okay year.
he
It's
had
just
no
that when you
kid.
look at where he was before he got hurt ahead of the
Correct.
All-Star break,
Yeah.
you would have been very disappointed to see those numbers end up where they were, and it
Correct.
was
Correct.
disappointing.
And so, like, to me, that's the most. I think he's the most important part of this season for this lineup, and not just because they're thinking about tinkering with the lineup, and he may lead off. We've seen it before. He's led off for the Phillies before. This isn't a brand new idea, but I think he needs to be consistent and confident as a player, and if that happens, I think it could disseminate back down through the lineup. Interesting side note. I don't know if you saw the lineup that they announced for today's game. I don't know if they're going to play. It's supposed to rain in Clearwater. But the lineup is Turner 1, Schwarber 2, Harper 3. What I thought was
Turner
an issue.
1, Schwarber 2, Harper 3. I mean, we know Bryce wants to hit third.
Yeah.
He does. I mean, now
Yeah.
I know there's been a lot of talk about it going Turner, Harper, Bohm, Schwarber, Castellanos, so that you're alternating right, left.
No, but they didn't do that. So here's the lineup today for today's game. Again, I don't know what it means, but Turner, Schwarber, Harper, Bohm cleanup, Castellanos 5, Stott 6, Realmuto 7, Kepler 8, and then Oscar Mercado is playing instead of Marsh or Rojas. So
Okay, so here's where I've said over time that I'm not a big lineup construction guy. It's a conversation that I'm more like I've always slanted towards. Just give me the right horses. Shuffling them a certain way isn't the end of the world. Certainly over 162, I believe that. The problem is that I think a lot of this lineup tinkering is about what happened last October or what has happened in October's past, which is, hey, why give in now to Bryce Harper? Because he's not being protected. There's not adequate protection behind him. Right. So if he is going to show patience, we'll put him on. We'll just deal with what happens after the fact. And I guess where I struggle with that lineup that you just read is it goes back to my core belief, which is it's about the horses. And if any scenario where Schwarber hits ahead of Harper, you're not protecting Harper. Like, are you protecting Bryce Harper in October with Alec Bohm?
Yeah.
And one thing I want to say is, like, I don't want to make the mistake, and maybe this will be the year it happens, but I've said each of the last 2 years, well, it's really been 3 now. If they show that they are in position to win a World Series, that they can truly do it, they will probably make a meaningful move at the deadline as a final piece. And 22 went by, and they did some things. Marsh was helpful, good player. Syndergaard, I guess, whatever. But it wasn't like a, wow, here come the Phillies. It didn't happen in 23. Didn't happen in 24. So I can't rely on this. So if you're showing me Bohm, I don't know. I feel like you're going to get into a series and you need another bat beyond Bryce Harper in your lineup that people are scared to death of to provide that protection to. If you're going to go Schwarber, Harper, they're really being protected now.
I don't disagree with you, Bob. And I look, I'm more about the lineup than you are. And I'm okay with Trey Turner leading off. He just needs to get on base more for me. I don't think he walks enough. But if he's hitting over 300, I'm okay with it.
Is that not that? Like, this is one of the things we got here without me having to direct it here. This is one of the things about Trey Turner hitting leadoff, right? Are they going to, whoever hits behind Trey Turner, are they going to be comfortable with Turner using his athleticism and actual base stealing ability? Or is he going to be muted in terms of his overall skills on the bases because whoever's up is looking to pop and they don't want to deal with the distraction of Turner in motion? Like, part of me wonders if that's why Bryce Harper might not be hitting directly behind Trey Turner.
Schwarber takes more walks, works the count more. So you put Schwarber behind Turner. It gives Turner the opportunity to steal bags.
But is like Turner going to be a guy that's a little bit more disciplined, or is he so I guess I'll use the word stubborn that, hey, look, this is how I play baseball. This is how I hit. This is what got me here. I have to let my physical ability take over, think less, swing the bat, do damage, be that guy. Or do I try to change my approach a little bit? Did 2024 Kyle Schwarber lay a blueprint for 2025 Trey Turner, where it's like, look, man, you don't have to leave the essence of what you are as a baseball player, but you've got to adapt a little bit your approach, especially if you're going to be in the leadoff spot. You can't have 3 weeks where Trey Turner's hitting 090, striking out 2 times a game, and having him hit leadoff every day.
No, you're right. 1,000% correct. And that's the thing, and that's why I'm a little bit skeptical of it, but I'm willing to give it a shot. Let's see how it goes. I'm not a huge fan of, like you said, left. First of all, I'm not a huge fan of both the lefties back to back, and I know both of them face left and right-handed. So I guess Rob Thompson looks at it and says it doesn't matter if they're back to back. They want to throw a lefty at them. Those guys are going to bat. Doesn't matter. And they both hit lefties okay last year as well. Actually, Schwarber hit lefties really well last year.
Yeah.
But I don't like how it sets up behind Harper at all. And I sometimes think that Schwarber would be better off behind Harper because that would give Harper more balls to hit. But then you sit there and go, is Harper the right guy behind Turner and as a leadoff hitter because Harper isn't as patient as Schwarber is, right? So it's like that's where the flaw kind of lies in this construction, which was why I was like, just leave Schwarber where he's at the top anyway. But yeah, like it's a unique thing, and look, it's low hanging fruit, Bob. It's the thing that everybody wants to talk about, and
especially because there's not a ton of obvious talking points here. We're not talking about who is going to win jobs. We kind of know who's going to win these jobs. So it's how do you optimally piece these people together to make it work?
Yeah.
One of the things that I keep thinking about here is what is the upside of this team that we're not counting on? So like the starting rotation, I think we all have high hopes about the starting rotation. The bullpen, I'm surprised that Jeff Hoffman's not back here. If you would have told me, even after the way things ended in October, he struggled a little bit down the stretch, I figured that they would come to an agreement there where I'm not saying I blame him either. I don't know 3 guaranteed years with Jeff Hoffman, some of the injury issues in the past. I don't know. I'm surprised he's not here. I don't know if this bullpen's better than it was a year ago. I know it can't pitch worse than it did in the postseason, but I don't know that the bullpen's any better than it was a year ago. I mean, Jordan Romano, we'll see. Does Carkering take a step forward? Maybe. Like, there's some upside there. There's some things that could come together. But I think it all comes back to this lineup because no matter how well the Phillies pitch, everyone's going to say, yeah, but. And if it's not yeah, but, see me in October, it's going to be yeah, but can this lineup be a little bit more consistent? And it's not that it's a bad lineup. It's not that the lineup doesn't score runs or can't hit home runs. It's not that. It's just that DNA of this lineup where you're like, they could, for any stretch of 4 to 5 games, go cold. And I know that any lineup can. But like when it really matters, can they bear down and do it? And I guess my question is this. Where are the potential pleasant surprises of this lineup? And I just want to go through real high level, very quickly, each guy. And I'm going to just pose to you a singular question.
Okay.
And then you just tell me where you think you're at on each of these guys. Because I struggle to get there. I'm kind of in the same exercise feeling myself skew a little bit negative. So we'll see here. Is this going to be Trey Turner's best year in a Phillies uniform?
If he's healthy, it should be.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, but I could see it. I could see it. I could easily say no. I'm not overconfident. I'm not super confident with that answer on Turner. But I think it could be.
Bryce Harper give you more than 285, 30 homers, and an OPS just shy of 900 this year?
I think that's probably what you're getting.
Is that him again? Okay.
Yeah.
Remember, there was like a month last year where we couldn't hit the ball over the fence. So I think there could be a little bit more upside there, at least in the OPS. Like,
yeah,
he's a guy that should probably be like living 930 to 950 for me, not like 890. Yeah. So I'm hopeful that there's just a tad bit more there.
That's fine.
Maybe. Alec Bohm, does he, as Rob Thompson talked about his maturity and wow, he's in great spirits. I mean, that to me was sort of not encouraging, frankly. I can't believe the manager had to say that, dude.
I don't believe in Bohm.
Neither do I.
No,
that's your guy right now who's sitting behind Bryce Harper, so that's exciting.
Yeah.
Kyle Schwarber duplicate 2024? Is that the ceiling?
Yeah, and I'd rather that than him kind of go back to more home runs, lower batting average. I like what I saw last year out of Schwarber more than I did the seasons before. So I prefer that, yes.
Did Castellanos give you any more than he gave you last year?
You would hope he does, but I think he's on the downside. If he gives you what he gave you from May through the end of the season, you're happy with it.
Okay, then let me give you the cookie here, the meatball. Bryson Stott, he was hurt last year, right? Like, he doesn't want to make it an excuse. They didn't use it as an excuse. It wasn't leaked last year. Like, they did not use it as an excuse. I appreciate that. Seems to be commonly believed that he will be better than he was a year ago. And he probably will need to be if he wants to be this team's second baseman or starting in middle infield for this team beyond 2025, because last year was not very encouraging. Do you expect him to be better this year? I do.
I do too. And I the one thing that I liked about Stott last year was he was more selective than he was in previous seasons. Mm-hmm. And finding out now about the injury, and you know, I had a lengthy conversation with a former player who you know very well about this and about, you know, why we didn't hear about it, et cetera, et cetera. And while I disagree with the guy about not letting it out there, I mean, look, guys play hurt. We all know this. We all know guys play through things in sports. That's the fact.
Is this the guy that I've had some conversations with myself?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. Like, I know that these things happen, right? I mean, we all know this. So to kind of keep it under wraps and then deal with the mounting pressure of the struggles and hearing people say, how come you're not performing like you did last year, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I think that that's more negative for the player. Like, just say, hey, listen, you know, I don't want it really out there, but I'm playing through this thing, and it's affecting me a little bit.
Right.
You know, I think you get a little bit more mercy at that point and a little bit more understanding from everybody. Yeah. I don't understand the bravado.
I actually think we've had a similar conversation about Taijuan Walker in the past, where you're like, you know, like, look, but the problem is that if you're not injured enough to be, that's the issue, right? Where you're not injured enough to be on the IL, you're out there. So do people really want to hear it? You don't really.
So the thing with Stott is that he wasn't hurt enough to be out of the lineup, but it was certainly affecting the way he was swinging the bat. And we talked about last year how his bat speed was really slow. Yeah. And one of the slowest in the league. Well, now we kind of know why. Yeah. Right? All right. Well, so I don't know, do you sit there and fix the problem and then miss weeks on end, and then that hurts the team, or are you at 75%, 80% better than what the alternative is? Sure. And that's the debate that they're going through. So yes, I expect more out of Bryson Stott this year. I think if he's healthy and he can swing the bat again, I think there's upside there. Yes.
I know you know the answer to it, but if I asked you to tell me what JT Realmuto hit last year or what his OPS was, I don't think that you would. Like, if you were just a casual fan and not covering the team, I think you'd be stunned to see what his final numbers were. Like, does it feel like he hit 266 last year? Does it feel like he had an OPS in mid 700s?
No. So when I was looking at this actually about a week ago, I was looking at some guys and, you know, what to expect, you know, kind of put it together. And I had a hard time believing that JT Realmuto was a 3-WAR player last year. Yeah. Like, he was. Again, that's according to Baseball Reference. But the fact that he was a 3-WAR player, because I thought his defense took a step back last year too. Yeah. And I know catchers sometimes get a WAR boost on the defensive side. I looked at that and I said, that's ridiculous. I can't believe that. And maybe it's because I watched him game in and game out, and he did have a good stretch before he got hurt. But I thought after he came back from the injury, he was just not the same player.
No, and I mean the postseason was not especially memorable for him either. Yeah. A couple big at bats that he wasn't able to bring in runs where they desperately needed someone to come through. I just think that's it. You know, like, I think what you see is what you get with him at this point. Now, if you only catch him 80% of what he caught a year ago, like, and you get him off his feet a little bit more, I know that there's been some early talk about letting him run around the outfield. I'll believe that when I see it.
Yeah.
I just don't think that that's what's going to happen. I think it's kind of like a convenient thing to think about now. I just don't see more from him in 25. I think that if you replicated those numbers out from a year ago, you'd probably take that. So I don't see a ton more there with him. Brandon Marsh,
Yeah.
you know, does it not feel like a year ago I might have been in on this, especially after the way he started? Like, doesn't it sort of feel like what you see is what you get? Like, good player, useful player, winning player, even. But like, I don't think he's a complete player, you know. And I think that it's not a knock on him as a person. I just don't think he's a complete player. I don't think he's a guy that's going to be able to start 150 games for you and be consistently productive. I think you have to use him accordingly.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like, there was I think it was Matt Gelb who wrote a story about Marsh, talking about him in relation to this new challenge system for balls and strikes. That he had the most balls called against him, or most strikes called against him that were actual balls in Major League Baseball last season. It's like 63, which was to me is a huge number,
Seems
right?
exorbitantly high.
Yeah, and it's it was determined in this conversation, and Matt did a good job writing it, that a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's a taller guy, but that the way he crouches when he swings, that's just his swing. It's the way it is. So if that's the case, and he's susceptible to high fastballs, and he's looking at them because they're balls in his mind, and he can't swing at them, and now he has to kind of swing at them because he doesn't want to eat up the challenges. He thinks the guys at the top of the order should eat up the challenges. Well, then I don't think he gets any better. Like, that's like that might be the only way you sit there and go, okay, if you challenge those pitches, and then if they start calling them balls because you're right, and then you're forcing a pitcher to come more into your sweet spot, okay, then maybe you can be a little bit more than what you are. But the reality is he doesn't seem to be a guy that wants to do that. He wants to kind of leave it for everybody else. Well, then guess what? Then you're going to be the same player.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the things that he said in that story. I thought it was a kind of a under the radar conversation that was had and not discussed. And I think that could impact him. Like, I think I can help him if he takes advantage of it, but I'm not certain that he's going to.
Right. And so you go through that, and then I guess the only other player that you see Max Kepler's new here, so I'll just leave him out of the conversation for a moment. But then the other player is Johan Rojas, who, again, we'll see. We've both clearly stated where we were at on him as a solution in 2024, and I think it was a huge mistake that they did not upgrade beyond that in terms of an immediate solution a year ago. And I think it did not help them. I think ultimately the main guys faltering the way they did, I'm not sure that if Johan Rojas was 25% better, it would have made a difference. But I certainly don't think you went into the postseason with the correct solution there. Looks like right now he is still very much part of the solution. You get more out of him. I know that there were some encouraging things over the winter that people pointed to.
Encouraging things over the winter last year too, Bob.
Right? Yeah. I mean,
come on,
humor me, I guess.
Look, I know I sound like I beat up on this guy all the time, but I just do not see a major league hitter in there.
No.
And I honestly, and I know I'm in the minority on this, but I don't necessarily see the smartest defensive outfielder, even though he makes a lot of great plays out there. I sometimes think he makes them look harder than they have to be. Because I don't necessarily think he takes the smartest routes all the time. I think you could be better than Johan Rojas. You absolutely can be better than Johan Rojas.
So it sounds like you typically skew positive with the Phillies. Last year we had a lot of conversations, and the gist of it in the second half of the year was me kind of going like, I don't know, man. Like, I guess we'll see. And you kind of going like, look, good team. Like, well,
yeah.
I'm not saying that to point out that you were wrong or anything, but I think, like, generally speaking, sure, you had more faith. I think by the end you had more faith in them than I did, if that's fair.
I did. There's no question I had more faith than you did last year.
So it sounds like, though, coming into this season, you and I might be on the same page, which is like, look, this is a good team that's going to win a lot of games, but also if you have concerns about this lineup, like, we get it, man. And Is that fair to say? Like,
Yeah, no. It's way too early for us to put our predictions out, but I don't think it's wrong of me to sit here and say that as of February 24th, if you ask me today, Bob, you say to me, Anthony, are the Phillies going to be in the World Series? Like right now, I'd say no. So that's automatically a step back from where I was with this team a year ago.
sure.
But does that mean I don't think they can get there? I certainly think they can get there. I certainly think they could be a team that gets there and even win it. But right now I look around the National League and I think there's a lot of improvement in the National League, and the Phillies are the same team. And they may have been the hunted early in the season last year, but they're going to have to do some hunting again this year. And maybe they're more comfortable in that spot. They were a better team in that spot in 22 and 23 until the Diamondback series. They were better chasing the better teams. So maybe they're more comfortable in that spot. I don't think that they're going to be at the top of the National League like they were for most of last year.
You know what I appreciated about the Eagles this year is that I made the point. Like the Eagles in 2017, they do the underdog thing and the dog masks, and like they got hot and they were the right team at the right time. And in 08, they overcome a deficit late in the year, the Phillies do, and they win the World Series. And so in 39 years of my life, those were the two championships I'd ever seen. And it feels like a lot of the Philadelphia professional franchises make these runs when nobody respects us. And the 22 Phillies, like, we're going to show you, right? Us against the world. And that's fun. Like, we lean into that in this city. It's cool. The thing I appreciated about the Eagles, and not that they didn't face a lot of criticism and not that they didn't have their share of doubters, but when they got to the postseason, it became quite clear that they were the best team on paper and that they cashed in on it. That, like, when you got past, especially once Detroit went down, it was like, if the Eagles don't win the Super Bowl, shame on them. And I knew they weren't favored in the Super Bowl, but it's because they were playing a two-time defending champ who was clearly not the same team that it was the prior 2 years. Like, anybody that analyzed those games said, like, the Eagles are a better team here. And so to see a team in an advantageous position kick down the door and actually win it was so nice. It was so nice to be like, we're better than you. We know it. And now we're going to go fucking show you. Whereas with this Phillies team, it's like they haven't been able to do that. And it seems like, and the reason why I bring this up is because you said it, like maybe they're more comfortable being the hunters. It feels like that to me. Mm-hmm. Like, I kind of hate them for that. Like, I kind of, like, I loved it in 22. I loved it in 23. But there's part of me that's like, come on, guys. Like, you know, you can't help but watch what just happened and feel it even a little bit more where you're like, damn it, this team probably should have won a championship in one of the last 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't disagree with you on that. You know, I look at it the same way. Like, but at the same time, you know, put your coach hat back on for a second. I know it's been a few years, but put your coach hat on for a second. Like, do you care what brings the fire in their belly?
No.
As long as they have it?
No, play the hits, man. If you want to do the, you know, hey, everyone's on the Braves because, you know, Acuna's back and the Mets signed Soto and look at the Dodgers and nobody's thinking about you. Like, I mean, if I were Rob Thompson, I'd be beating that drum right now.
Yeah.
Probably would have been the first thing I said in the first team meeting.
Yeah.
And there's part of me that's like, you know, it would be nice to just be the alpha and just rip apart everyone on your way there. Like, yeah. We're not used to that. We don't do that here. We've been there's very few times where we've been in that position as a city, and this franchise has been in that position as a franchise, and very few times that they have been, it's ended up very disappointing. But yeah, if I'm Rob Thompson, I'm certainly selling that.
Yeah, I mean,
Soto, the Braves, and Strider's going to come back, and
so while I agree with you, I can understand why the Phillies use that as motivation.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, I know I'm kind of sitting on the fence there with that, but to me, I just think you have to. Because
it's funny because like the in the past, it's like this team has to get off to a good start, and then they don't. And then finally last year they do. And now I'm like, I don't know. Do they need to get off to a good start? Should they just be incredibly mediocre for 75 days and then figure it out sometime beginning of June? Would that be more useful? Like, I don't even know what I care about. You know, that's actually a big part of this is that there's been such defined talking points about what the Phillies have to do. Like win a division, get home field. I don't know. Does it even matter? Does it matter if the Phillies win 97 games or 86 games? And that's the one thing I sort of hate about this is that is very NBA. Like that is very NBA. Does it actually even matter as long as they just get in? Because like last year I said, I want to see you flex from the start. Everyone thinks you're this good. Go show them how good you are. Go win 95 games. Go win 100 games. Get home field. Do it. They did it, and it didn't matter. So now I'm like, I don't know. Maybe this team's better served getting ripped apart by everybody for 2 months, talking about how they're all cooked and over the hill, and then they figure it out. I just don't even know what I expect. Not only do I not know what I expect to see, but if I were putting on a fan hat, I don't even know what I want to see. What would make me feel better about the 2025 Phillies in the month of April? That should probably be what we talk about on the next show, because I don't know what the answer to that is.
I don't necessarily know if I know what the answer to that is from a fan perspective either. But I would tell you that I probably think it's going to be somewhere in between what we've gotten in the past couple years. I don't think they're going to be as good as of a start as they had last year. Obviously, that's very difficult to do. But I also don't think it's going to be as slow of a start as they've had.
Do you think if they had 21 wins on May 1st, that would be like, damn, this team is really good? Like, would people be excited by that? Or do you think people would say, like, yeah, they're good. We knew they were going to be good. They're odds makers have it 91.5 total wins coming in, with the fourth best odds to win the World Series. Like, we knew they were going to be good. This is great. But it doesn't materially change the way I view this thing.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's what it's going to be, Bob. I think that's kind of the pace that they're going to be on. I look at them as a kind of, right now, I look at them as kind of a 92, 93 win team. And I think that's kind of the pace that they're going to be on for most of the season. And if that's where they're at on May 1st, I'll sit there and say, yeah, good start. It's not blowing us away, but it's also, not bad. And it's kind of what we expected. And I think that might be the answer, is just kind of don't have super expectations, but also don't be super pessimistic. Just expect the team to be decent and be good and see where it goes. I think that's maybe the fan expectation.
There's one question I have, and I waited till the very or near the end of our show here to ask it to you.
Yeah.
Do you think that the Phillies think that they can win the World Series? And I'll give that to you in two different ways, from a clubhouse perspective and from a front office perspective. Or is this about being pretty good? Let's just see what happens because that's baseball. And also we'll keep the run going beyond this year because we'll be able to reload, retool, have a little bit more financial flexibility. And we're totally okay with that.
That's a great question, Bob, because I do think that if you have some foresight and you can look down the road, we're looking at a situation in Major League Baseball where the 2027 season, at least part of it, may be in doubt. Because the CBA comes up at the end of next year. And so things are going to be really kind of touch and go. So if you're the Phillies and you're kind of looking at what you have for the future and you want to consistently be in the mix, you're better off not depleting the best prospects in your farm system and just giving it a go with what you have this year and next year. And then see what the new world order is like after the new CBA.
Yeah.
And you have the Painters and the Millers and the Crawfords, by that time maybe even Taiit is ready to be a catcher in Major League Baseball, who knows. So you have your best guys coming up, kind of similar to what you did for the team that eventually won a World Series in 2008, where you had all those prospects coming in and play, all those homegrown guys. But with that in mind, you look at 2025 as a season where it's like, okay, this is the last year of Schwarber, this is the last year of Real Muto. We'll have some money available to play in 26, and if we want to go one more time all in with this group or most of this group, we can play with the money next year more than we could play with the money this year. That's why all these signings have been one-year signings or guys on minor league deals or non-roster invites or whatever. That's what this season has been. Maybe that's the front office's viewpoint. We're still good enough to win with what we have, but we don't want to give up our future because there is an uncertain future in the sport.
Yeah, I think that that's kind of right on. I mean, I'm looking at their 26 obligations right now, and it starts to clear. $38 million combined for Castellanos and Taijuan Walker in 2026 isn't ideal.
Well, I think, but so here's the thing on those two guys. One, I don't. I think that they're going to eat the money on Walker. I really do. I don't see how he makes this roster. There has to be injuries to a couple of pitchers, I think, for him to make the roster.
That being said, you're. I think when you're doing your bookkeeping, you're still saying we spent $18 million on Taijuan Walker this year.
Yeah, I mean, you might be able to send him
Unless
off somewhere.
$14 million because someone ate 4 of it on the trade, maybe.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you might be able to save a few $1 million on a deal to send him somewhere. Who knows? I think Castellanos' contract is tradable for next year.
1 year, 20.
Yeah, 1 year, 20. I think someone will take as opposed to, 2 years and $40 million for that guy.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, in that world, I mean, obviously you have other guys here that you have to consider and potential extensions and all that, but you do have some flexibility beyond this year. It does allow you to sort of recalibrate if you need to. Let me just ask you this, and I don't know if you have anything else you want to hit on, but I was going to wait, but it feels appropriate right now. You mentioned Schwarber and Real Muto entering their final years here. Will this be their final year?
It's funny to say this, Bob, because if you asked me if I was the GM, would I bring one of them back and the other not, or both back or neither back? I would try first and foremost to keep Schwarber, because I think that as a DH, he gives you exactly what you need, plus the value that he brings to that clubhouse.
Sure.
Right? As the leader of the clubhouse. That's not a knock on Real Muto. I just think that JT's just 34. Like, how long are you going to keep an aging catcher catching? Right? Even if you have to go out and get somebody as a stopgap before Tait's ready, like, you do that. But at the same time, I can make the argument that you could bring him back on a short deal as well, maybe a 2-year thing, whatever. Do I think that they're both? I don't think they're both going to be here, and I think that they're going to lean more towards keeping Real Muto than keeping Schwarber. And that's not the way I would go, but I think that that's the way they would go.
It's funny you say that. I thought going into last year, that there's no world in which this guy, being Kyle Schwarber, is not here beyond 25. Like, you've heard me talk about him on the show. I think that he's the guy, like the straw that stirs the drink, so to speak. I think he's a good dude, obviously a very productive player. I think if things had gone differently, and maybe they do this year, he could kind of like go down as like an all-time Philly, where like, just in terms of, not when you look at the numbers necessarily, but just in terms of how he's viewed by fans, like just a guy that you like adore, right?
Yeah.
And not to say that if he were to leave after this year and the Phillies win 92 games and losing the DS, that he wouldn't be well received upon a return, but he falls short of that, like that grouping, that tier of player, that group of alumni. I would have thought that it was a slam dunk that he would get another deal here. And I expect him to have a good season. I just don't know if it comes to it where it's like, look, it's going to require 3 years, $90 million, or 3 years, $80 million, if they say, like, we want to be fully committed to that. Like, do you want to get yourself a little more athletic, a little younger? Is that where you really want to tie up that type of payroll for another 3 years for a guy that's a DH? And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know that they know what they're going to do yet. I don't think they do, if I had to guess. I know he's expressed some preliminary desire to come back here. But will there be another team, another club that says, we want this guy and we value him more than the Phillies do at a certain year or dollar amount? I think that that's going to happen. Yeah. So, if Kyle Schwarber is comfortable with leaving something on the table, then I think there's a shot. If he is hard pressed, if he wants to go get top dollar or the best contract, I don't think it's here.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Bob. And that's it. The other thing is I think that the Phillies would prefer to have flexibility as to how the DH works. I mean, keep in mind you have Harper turning 33 next year. Turner's getting older. Obviously, I don't think Turner's I think this is his last year as the shortstop. And I wouldn't be surprised. Look, if Aiden Miller's coming quick, and if Aiden Miller proves that he could play at the major league level this year, it wouldn't surprise me if they figured out a way to get Turner in the outfield and Aiden Miller at shortstop at the halfway point, kind of like they did in 22 when they got rid of Didi Gregorius and brought Bryson Stott in to play shortstop, right? It wouldn't surprise me if that happened. So with that said, I think that they'd like to open up the possibilities and flexibility for guys like Harper and Turner since they're here long term. And it's a painful goodbye to Schwarber, but I think that ultimately is the direction they'll go. And I think that you look at Real Muto and sit there and go, we don't have the guy ready yet. Our best catching prospect's 19 years old. Yeah. So we got to give it a couple more years before we get to that guy.
Yeah, like if we're going to just go out and sign a catcher who's going to give us okay offensive production, why wouldn't it be the guy that's already here that is kind of a foundational piece of what we do?
Right. And I think that's probably the way that they'll go.
Very interesting. All right, what do you got for me? One last thing here?
One last thing. You know, we haven't done a show in forever, so it's only customary that my one last thing goes to the Mets. It just has to go to the Mets. So here's the thing, Bob. Have you looked at the Mets? Have you thought about the Mets? I mean, obviously Juan Soto going there is a huge move for the Mets. There's no doubt about it. It makes that lineup much better. And but talk about a team that has a top-heavy lineup. It's the Mets.
Yes.
And here's the thing, their president David Stearns was talking the other day about their pitching staff, and he basically said, our starting staff is going to surprise a lot of people with how good they are.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like perplexed by this, because here's a team that may be the only team in baseball that can spend like the Dodgers because of their owner. Okay, and their starting rotation this year is Kodai Senga, who's a good pitcher, but he was hurt last year, so you don't know what it's going to be like full season coming off of injury. David Peterson, Clay Holmes, who was a reliever, who's now converting to a starter at age 32. Paul Blackburn, Griffin Canning, who had like a 5 ERA last year with LA. Manaea just strained his oblique, so he's going to start the season on the IL. Montas, we don't know. He got hurt the first day of spring training. Both those guys are over 30, but neither have been really good. I mean, Manaea had a good half year last year. Do you look at that rotation and go, oh, yeah, championship caliber rotation? Because I don't.
I mean, Peterson's a guy that got hot. Manaea was awesome at the end of the year. I don't know. There is a little bit of if I were the Mets, I would have re-signed Manaea. I would have. I like the signing, but you don't know for sure that. Oh, hey, I know he made adjustments to delivery. I get it, but I don't know that he's going to just bring that momentum over to 25 and beyond.
Yeah.
That rotation leaves a lot to be desired, and I do think that that's why there are some guys they could hit. There are guys with some ceiling there. But there's a lot of ifs. Yeah. And that's why when you look at the Phillies versus the Mets, the Phillies have a slight nod in terms of the odds, in terms of winning the division. The Braves are ahead of both right now. But I think that a lot of odds makers would slot the Phillies in ahead of the Mets for that very reason, which is offensively, I probably like the Mets lineup a little bit more than the Phillies at this moment. I don't know, maybe. But how much of it was when a team gets hot, right? It's because guys play a little bit above what they are. Yeah. And I do wonder how much of what we saw from the Mets last year was real in terms of damn, this is a certified killer. These guys are really good. They figured things out versus, they were playing just a little bit above their head.
Yeah.
I do not think the Mets are going to win the NL East this year. I will say that. I know we save our predictions for later in spring training and all, but I think that there's enough questions with the Mets that you're looking at a team that probably wins somewhere between 85 and 89 games and is probably a playoff team. But because I do think that owner will do something if he needs to in July to make it work. That team's making the playoffs this year, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because I think that when you look at it, Bob, obviously there's 7 playoff teams, right? Or Sorry, 6 playoff teams. And other than, I don't think there's a wild card team in the Central. I just don't. And when you look at it, the East and the West are so top heavy.
Yeah.
But somebody's going to not make it. And when you think about Braves, Phillies, Mets, Dodgers, Padres, Diamondbacks, one of those teams, at least, guaranteed based on just the numbers game, is not going to make it. And if there's a surprise somewhere, then you're talking 2 of them. It's crazy to me to think that. But that's the reality of the National League this year. It's a top heavy league, but it's got some depth in it, and in the top heavy part of it, and that's why it's got to be a little bit scary for teams, for every team. I don't think there's one team, maybe the Dodgers. Other than the Dodgers, I don't think there's one team that you look at and go, oh yeah, they'll cruise to a playoff spot.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a world where this all flames out. I mean, we just talked about all those lineup issues, and let's say Jesus Luzardo doesn't stay healthy, and Zach Wheeler's been ultra dependable the last couple of years. He's getting up there. Like, what if he misses 2 months? Aaron Nola, we're going to go through a stretch where we're like, what's wrong with Aaron Nola this year? Like, we're going to do that. And if the bullpen's not as good, like the Phillies are an 83-win aging team, and this was a mess. And we're going to be very thankful that they have that payroll flexibility beyond this year because it's over as constructed. Like, I could see that happening. Sure.
Yeah, could happen. So, yeah.
That's a great place to end it right there.
Yeah, good. Just be negative. That's all. We haven't, That's what we made our name on, Bob. Yeah. It was negativity, and so now we just ended it with negative. So.
All right. Well, look, we will have at least one more here on Crossed Up before we make the jump and point you in a direction and how you can follow us and doing all those things. But for now, obviously, still follow the us on X there. I'm at Bob_Wankel and at Ansan Phillies, where you can follow Anthony, and we'll have news about what's coming next year over the next couple days. Probably, I'd like to have it all out there by the end of the week, but. We said we'll do at least one more show here before we make the jump. Anthony, you got anything for us before we get out of here? You good?
No, good.
All right. All right, cool. We'll talk to you all soon. Thanks for listening.